What about me? With you? Okay, you go first.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Seminar 3 of the Digital Heritage Seminars that we're offering here in the Digital Studio this semester. My name is Rachel Fensham, and I'm the Assistant Dean of the Digital Studio for the Faculty of Arts. But as is customary, I'd like first of all to pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land on which this seminar is being held, the Wurundjeri people, and pay our respects to their elders past and present, and anyone here welcome meeting with us today. This seminar is, as I said, part 3 or session 3 of the series, in which I guess we're trying to examine questions of what is digital heritage today, and how does the digital landscape and digital technologies and the digital environment more generally shift and change the dynamics of what we understand as heritage, and how do the various facets of work that's taking place in the university in the digital heritage space perhaps inform the bigger debates that are impacting on galleries, libraries, art galleries, museums, that sector, but also even more generally for the public, their interactions with what we might understand as heritage. And I'm really looking forward to this one because it introduces another media, if you like, that of film media. Film media is a technology that's obviously partly celluloid, but is also, to a large extent now, already digital. So it's in that kind of space of the born digital. And so to talk to us about that is Donna Hensler. Donna Hensler is in charge, or has been in charge, of the screen production teaching program at the VCA in the School of Film and Television. And I think you said in your blurb that you've been responsible for about 150 short films a year as students are making films. And she's worked very assiduously over the last few years to build this film archive. And has learned a lot, I think, about what it is to navigate that landscape more generally, such that she's now, in fact, doing a PhD on short films and films as heritage. So thank you, Donna, for this seminar. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for coming today. As Rachel said, I'm going to be talking about my PhD research project, and it's a case study in the digitisation, preservation and dissemination of the Student Film School archive that belongs to Australia's longest continuing film school. And my aim over the next 40 minutes is that you're going to walk away with 3 key understandings. The first is the philosophical and contextual framework required to develop a project like this. The second is that collaboration is key to the success of a digital archive project. And the third is that with the right metadata and project structure, audiovisual materials can be reshaped, reimagined and enhanced using a variety of technological tools. But this is pending institutional support and strategic alliance. So let's begin with an analogy or a bad joke. And that is that the short film can be likened to cheese. It thrives on attention and it gets better with age. It doesn't stop there, folks. For the student, short film can be as divisive as blue vein cheese. The people who see blue vein as merely dust-flavoured mould cheese will see the student film as angst-ridden coming-of-age exercises that commonly relay 3 distinct themes: loneliness, death and abuse. These people will demand their 10 to 15 minutes back. They'll scoff at the filmmaker's website when they read that said film is an existential visual analysis of loneliness or death or abuse. They're going to roll their eyes as the festival programmer claims the work as a meditative reflection on ageing or death or abuse. And don't get them started when they overhear that one writer even suggested that the film is a nod and a wink to the teacher in Ecclesiastes as he wails, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. But for those that know that there is more to blue vein cheese than meets the eye, they're going to see the short film as a democratic and experimental medium. They understand that the short film is a leveraging tool. a chance for the director, writer, producer to find their voice and flex his or her creative muscles in anticipation of securing access to greater pools of funding for bigger projects. For these people, they embrace the notion that students arrive at the telling of their short stories with fresh voices. They're often entering into political, cultural, religious, or social discourses for the first time. They get that their work is often unpolished, unformed, uncontextualised, unrefined, but it's within this rawness that the authenticity lies. It's the lack of polish, refreshing in a world where everything is so well crafted to manipulate audiences and how they should think or feel. Students who make films are still finding, defining, creating their voice. And unbeknownst to them, they're actually capturing the zeitgeist of the times. That's the end of my cheese analogy. Short films get better with age because the elements that make up these moving image objects transcend time. Filmmakers develop and grow, and they often go on to have significant careers. Actors eventually make their break, and the short film becomes a time capsule of their early career escapades. Locations change, suburbs become gentrified. The cultural milieu of Melbourne transforms, becoming more diverse and fascinating over time. When volunteers involved in this project started to digitise stills associated with the films, we realised that Australian international favourites such as Sigrid Thornton, Rachel Griffiths and Toni Collette had once starred in the films as a way to break into the business. Creating and making is often unwieldy and complex. To excel in the moving image craft, there are many elements that need to be perfectly synthesised, from concept to story to actors, locations, costumes, production design, cinematography, music, through the distribution and marketing campaign. Pending resources, this is often really difficult to accomplish. So short films are a cinematic training ground for filmmakers, and because stories in and of themselves are multifarious, touching on subjects and themes that range from adolescence to identity, counterculture, gangsters, monsters, puppets, Nazis, robots, sexuality, technology and women, you can see that a project like this can be difficult to put into one box. I think the archive, like our stories, intersects with many different fields, concepts, themes and discourses central to the world we live in and a world that is imagined. The moving image medium is exploding in this age, or rather post-age, of digital disruption. The 2012 report by Deloitte titled Digital Disruption, Short Fuse, Big Bang suggests that for some, digital innovation will be the cornerstone for future value creation. This digital archive project speaks to this directly. The philosophy centres on providing unprecedented access to a student film collection, along with creating a pipeline for all the born digital works for pedagogical, research and engagement purposes. I like to think of this project as rhizomatic in structure, and it stems from Deleuze and Guattari's philosophic concept of the rhizome. It's a botanical term, and it references the stalk of a plant that sprouts roots and shoots as it develops, spreads and intersects into new things. The concept can be used to connect thinking about the digital archive, in which conversations about past, present and future can grow and intersect with new people, ideas, disciplines and platforms. This project came from humble beginnings and has grown into a rather large and at times unwieldy beast. It's by its very nature interdisciplinary, traversing the fields of digital heritage, archives, records management, information technology, new media, digital pedagogy, computer science and more. It speaks to preserving and celebrating cultural memory via our audiovisual heritage. It allows the idea of the archive to transform from this fixed idea of, from a fixed place of preserving tangible objects to this living and breathing network of moving organisms that's dynamic and continually growing. Of course, questions around shifting technologies and project sustainability can undermine these very grandiose visions. However, rather than seeing these as a negative, I've just embraced these challenges and tried to mitigate them in the overall strategy. So I'm going to rewind for a moment, and please excuse any audiovisual puns. I arrived at this project and practice firstly as a filmmaker and a producer. And implicit to this work is the idea that filmmaking will come up in a sec, is about collaboration. And in order to be sustainable, filmmaking or storytelling, it must connect with an audience. So I also came to this work as an educator who discovered a systematic problem, a situation that demanded responsiveness within the organisation I was working for, and that's the University of Melbourne VCA Film and TV School. This responsiveness has been framed by my developing an action research project aimed at addressing the problem that staff, students and the general public could not easily access, if at all, the archive student films made by the film and TV students. So access to the films was through the faculty's library, it was on DVD, some of the earlier films were available on VHS. And there was absolutely no doubt that students were eager to see the work of their predecessors, but they didn't know what they were looking for. So if they wanted to watch comedy films from graduates that came before them, unless they tapped into the knowledge of an existing staff member, they had no idea what titles were out there, even to match the most basic search criteria. So films were therefore stored in the collective memories of staff and students, passed on to each other through generations, through in-class and retrospective screenings or word of mouth. The changing distribution landscape for the short film festival market meant that increasingly more online players were establishing themselves as access points from which to stream content. So students' expectations about where the content they made and would sit was putting pressure on the school to enter into the digital landscape or remain archaic in both its format and vision. In addition, the vulnerability of the media and its eroding condition and soon-to-be obsolete hardware meant the archive would remain even more inaccessible, hidden and attracting dust rather than audiences. So it was from this place that the Digital Archive Project was born, developing a philosophy that centred on making graduate student film works accessible so that pedagogical and research outcomes could be newly defined and a broad range of audiences could be discovered. The many other benefits of the projects included raising the school's profile of the graduates, promoting film and TV courses, and it meant that the digitisation project could become a significant contributor to individuals and institutions around the world. The pervasiveness of digital as a medium has transformed expectations, clearly signalling that users expect unlimited access to information, and without a significant stake in the virtual landscape, institutions would be at a significant disadvantage in positioning themselves as relevant and as leaders in teaching, research and engagement. So in our archive room, there was a hybrid mix of 16mm, 35mm magnetic tape, which was Digibeta, Betacam SP, HDCam, U-matic, VHS and XDCam. And as many of you are aware, in relation to the magnetic tapes, NFSA released the paper of the deadline 2025, tapes can't wait, basically saying that tape players would no longer be usable because the trade knowledge and experience would be lost. So what was going to happen, or what will happen to the stories that are held on these tapes? Curiosity motivated me to begin. The ticking time bomb motif, framed as the threat of obsolescence, spurred me into action. As a producer, before one takes on a project, it's important to be able to answer the following questions, which I believe cross over neatly into the creation of a digital archive project. So, why make this film? Or why digitise? Who's the audience? Which impacts the format, style, delivery? How much is it going to cost? What are the best mediums to show my content? Or can I reuse it in other areas, do spin-offs, etc.? What do I want the audience to think or feel at the end of my film or project? Who do I need to partner with to make this happen? And that's the fundamental principles of collaboration. So in addition, a work #project should ideally be framed within a socio-cultural political context, because if we don't frame it, our audience will. A digital archive project must answer these same questions. I had to get sold on this project, and what enabled that was when the film school commissioned a significance assessment, and the archive was tested against key criteria related to its historical, cultural, social, political, aesthetic and research significance. It came out strong in all areas, and this enabled me to start to create this narrative around preserving and providing access to this historic and cultural collection. Rachel Wilson's an academic from RMIT, and she states that student films, often marginalised as merely tools for training, are interesting historical documents in their own right, and yet they remain almost completely absent from the moving image historical record. Although film schools have long been seen as domains of white middle class to upper class privileged kids, there is a higher level of diversity that walks through the doors. This may not be translated through to Hollywood or our television screens, as evidenced through Screen Australia's 2016 report, Seeing Ourselves: Reflections on Diversity in Australian TV Drama. So we've got an opportunity to contribute to conversations around gender inequality, cultural diversity, and representation through data analysis of our metadata. For example, how many Indigenous filmmakers have walked through VCA film school doors? And if not that many, how do we start to address this gap? What evidence can we find that contributes to research around gender and identity gaps within the screen and culture and arts industry in Australia? How many women filmmakers go through film school and go on to have significant careers? So there's great opportunity for statistical research to be done once the archive's fully operational and analysis opportunities are explored. So part of this early phase was about defining audiences. And of course, there's staff and students, but beyond this, there were researchers, industry, and the public. Research needed to be done into the various uses and potentials of the archives and ways to make it meaningful and accessible for generations to come. And the way to do this was to understand what metadata we had and what we needed to ensure the metadata and archive was, So VCA Film and TV, there's our little brag. We're renowned for educating innovative and effective audiovisual communicators. Our student films have received many international prestigious awards and invitations to screen at A-list festivals. The film school engages with film festivals and other industry partners for exhibition opportunities throughout each year. And we want these bodies to be able to access the archive so they can easily view the latest student film work in anticipation that those films might go on to screen at their film festival. And we also want project partners to be able to curate and create their own collections so that they might want to dip into it for future-based screening opportunities. So the ultimate goal is for the public to engage with the archive, but it's more than likely going to be via password-protected access. The University of Melbourne holds the copyright in the student films, and this is a long-standing tradition, and it came about because certain films in the 80s and 90s would attract commercial sale exhibition, and often there would be television sales, and they'd pay a significant amount. And there was a dispute between the film school and the actors union, and that resulted in an agreement that ensured basically all actors would be paid at standard commercial rates, pending commercial sales. So the agreement's still operational, although as discussed, the distribution landscape's changed. The revenue is actually no longer there. There's lots of online players, but they're paying absolutely nothing for films. So there's this tension between the commercial and artistic imperative, and there's this opportunity to challenge the structure. But we need to have the films accessible digitally for pedagogical research and engagement purposes with no monetary value attached. And we hope that obviously that's going to assist in showcasing the filmmakers and bringing more value to the school and its history. And we've got in our collection, also I don't want to skip ahead, sorry, 1,700 films, and they date back to 1966. That takes into account Swinburne Film and TV, which transferred to the VCA in 1992. It brought along its audiovisual holdings. It eventually merged with the VCA, which then became the University of Melbourne, and that obviously took on the collection's provenance. So beyond this, the diligence of long-term staff, there was absolutely no real management of procedures with respects to the material, although the film school held the copyright. So you can see in this database, numbers were allocated to the films and they were stored on the shelves in what was dubbed the film school vault. If staff needed to access a copy, they searched the database, they located it by its number, they went into the archive room, and then they gave it to someone to organise playing it off the master tape or they might have had it digitised in that moment just as a cheap access copy. If it was a celluloid film copy, there was generally a backup tape, or you just couldn't play it at all. Because of this, in class, films cited were often American or European, but films made with $1 million plus budgets. So immediately it pitted our students in an unlevel playing field. Rather than comparing their own ideas to or mistakes or realisations to films of their students, they were who worked with similar resources and budgets, they were comparing themselves to a very unlevel playing field. Valerie Strauss writes that benchmarking in education should be about discovering where we stand and learning about who we are and what we do by observing those around us. When students see others' work, they can be inspired or motivated. Wow, I want to tell stories like that. Or I can do better. It sets a realistic starting point, enabling students to be in control of shifting the goalpost as necessary to telling the story they desire to tell. Students don't even realise sometimes how much films cost or how many people are required for the collaboration of their film's realisation. So having access to metadata surrounding this offers the film student a realistic understanding upfront of what they're going to need if they wish to tell the story that they want to tell. So what we had initially was basic metadata surrounding the film. The initial process was that the filmmakers handed in prescribed but unstandardised metadata relating to their film via a Word document template. So the information included title, synopsis, duration, format, key creatives, crew, cast, and themes. But for many students, they often didn't even know what themes were. For example, one student put squids as their theme. Presumably, the film featured squids. This information was then copied and pasted into this FileMaker database. And this was a really arduous and labour-intensive administrative process. Information at times was entered on an ad hoc basis. It left the database incomplete. Spelling errors, some information is in capitals, others isn't, and the metadata basically had to be completely redone. And without the films, though, it was only ever a basic source of truth. So it was only when the films were digitised that the metadata could be verified and added to. One of the first steps was to standardise this metadata based on a schema, and we chose Dublin Core. I quickly realised the project had to be approached in piecemeal, meaning the Dean wouldn't write me a cheque for the digitisation of the entire collection, as I'd naively assumed. Instead, we actually had to raise money bit by bit. So first, we capitalised on the film school's 50th anniversary, and we digitised 50 films to feature on our very own YouTube channel. Films that displayed historical, social, aesthetic significance, along with profiling famous filmmakers and festival favourites. I'm just going to play you the trailer from that. And you can jump onto YouTube and find this collection of films. So this iterative process, I'll just have to stop that because it will play it again. And I'll get there. Okay. All right, so this iterative process enabled us to gain much needed traction for the project, and it allowed us to test processes such as file formats, ingest procedures, along with setting digitisation guidelines. We outsourced a lot of the process, but there was so much work to do in-house as each film needed to be quality controlled and the metadata completed. Plus, there was the issue then of how to store the assets, because now they were just vulnerable on hard drives. So at the same time, I received money from the University of Melbourne Engagement Initiative grant to overhaul the existing database with a new relational structure. and input of metadata, enabling the films to be searchable in the database in a more sophisticated and user-friendly manner. So this was an aspect of the original database, and what you saw before with the film information was two parts of that. And it was intended as this kind of ledger of coursework requirements. And what the grant enabled was it to be repurposed as a working archival catalogue of student film productions. And it enabled existing metadata useful to this project to be structured in a way that opened up exciting possibilities for object-based learning, amongst other things. This phase of the project was really essential, as it basically helped us establish what metadata was useful, and it also meant that students for the first time could actually enter their own metadata into the database rather than a staff member doing it. This is an important aspect of the project, because actually what that does is it encourages students to think critically and contextually around learning object metadata, and it places their creative practice in the outside world, and they use their film objects as a line of inquiry. The database also meant that a link to the films could be streamed within the platform, and that would mean that, you know, we'd have further use. Look, there was great potential for this database, but it was hampered by a few things, and that was really the access into it was really problematic. There was a limited number of users that could log in at the same time. You had to get licenses. Entering metadata required training. It was still prone to human error. Searching the database wasn't really that easy. And I think it did require some training, and staff basically just didn't embrace it. For them, it's just another university system that they've got to get a license for and learn how to use. So it was always going to be an interim solution, so we didn't push it actively. But the next step for us was to find a digital asset management system or a repository to safely store the assets. And ideally what I was after was a system or a platform that would not only allow us to store and preserve the digital objects, but would enable students to enter their own metadata and access other student works. And I imagined a site that was easily searchable, navigable, and encouraged user engagement. Enter the amazing team at Research Platform Services, Australian National Data Service, and MediaFlux. So I touched on earlier about the importance of collaboration to filmmaking, and this is where for us the project really kicked off. The need for institutional support and project partners is absolutely vital to ensure the long-term sustainability of any digital archive project. So it's often said that timing is everything, and indeed with this, this has certainly been the case with our project. Through teaming up with Research Platform, or ResPlat, we were able to take to form part of a project they were undertaking with ANZ and a commercial partner, Architecta, who's supplier of MediaFlux data operating system, which is the kind of repository to hold the assets. That project was about transforming digitised films into a highly curated, metadata-rich film archive accessible via MediaFlux, and it was going to be reconfigured to ensure the works were presented in the most engaging way possible. So connectivity was the key in this phase, and it meant that we wanted to create connections between systems, organisations and people. We were basically considering the following sites listed there. So now our work could start to feed into a larger institutional mission to ensure maximum university, national and international use of and advantage from our important collection, along with others. A further grant was received from the university's Student Services Amenities Fund, and this was for the development and design of a website to curate and showcase the films. Through intensive research and development, we basically discovered that in order to ensure long-term project sustainability, we needed to work within a university-supported platform, and have been able to use the grant to invest further into MediaFlux with the continued aid of ResPlat. So, those were just, some further external and industry connections and possibilities. So what I want to show you now is the tools, because I'm sure you're all really interested in that. Just bear with me. Okay, so this is the first phase. And I know you're catching me on camera, and I do understand it's a little 1990s, but we are developing this. At the moment, this is what it looks like. We basically, you can log in. At the moment, you're going to need a username and a password, and we need to get all of this integrated with everyone's usernames and logins. Again, that's a really hard part of the project. So you can start to watch the film. And we've got some basic metadata up here: director, the genre, the duration. This is part of the 50 films that we got digitised. The short synopsis, and then we can go down and there we can edit it. There's a longer description. Now, some of the films in the collection are going to have more dense metadata than others. For others, this is stuff that, again, as part of the Born Digital collection, we'll get this live, but we have to create this for the past work. And not every film has gone on to achieve success, etc. Not every film will have detailed metadata. But at its very basic, we're going to see things like the title, if there's other titles, the director, maybe Andrew was called Andy. So we need to note that in the database. And then we've got a list of contributors. And don't get hung up on the kind of way this looks at the moment, because this is the first phase. But we've got a drop-down list here that we get people to choose from. And they're generally clearly identified key crew roles that have been recorded. It's been interesting to observe that over time, certain roles have changed names, but we've had to kind of settle on just defining, okay, look, a director of photography is a director of photography, or a cinematographer, or, and just pick one and put it into that sort of box. On and on it goes, and as you can see, there's often a lot of people in film. So to get this metadata and type it in, it's a really extensive process, and we've been able to do that through volunteers through the Museums and Collections, Cultural Collections program. Then we've got the year. Shooting schedule will be relevant for the Born Digital stuff. Why? Because we might want to kind of look at, well, let's see films that are shot over summer, or let's see films that are shot maybe on a significant historical date, for example. But we don't really have that stuff for the past work. Then we've got era depicted, and you can choose there if it's relevant to the film, all standardised. Any keywords and themes, and this Cassandra Gordon, one of our key players in this project, sitting here, and really basically just developed through film archive sites the correct themes that you would class your films under. This might grow and develop as time moves on, but it's good to standardise them from the start. And location, settings, the genre. Is it a action, an adventure, animation, children's, comedy, etc.? Moving image or multimedia interactive, duration, silent or sound, the language might be in Cantonese, etc. Any subtitles, colour or black and white, or is it both, colour and black and white? Aspect ratio, frame rate, stereo or mono or Dolby. And this was originally filmed on Super 16. That's really important to note. It had a great success at film festivals, so we want to note that. We want to note that there's an advisory warning. This film's got violence in it. And, later again, what we want to track is how much are people making their films for. Some films at the VCA are made for $50,000. Some films are made for $5,000. So what's the difference in style and format? And again, when it comes down to here, we want to record whether we've got actors clearance and music clearance, etc., etc. So maybe we want to do something else with this film, maybe we can't. And that's the original format and archive number. Damn Smart was the digitizer for that. Yeah. So at the moment, this again is this is where we're getting all of our assets. You can see over the side, that we've got our MP4 stills from the film, our high-res 10 megabit proxy file, which would say might go on a YouTube, or maybe just in class they might play that. That's the ProRes 422 mezzanine middle shelf copy, and this is our MXF JPEG 2000 copy. And so they're all stored there. You wouldn't, as a user, be able to download those things. We have to set all of those permissions. Again, another really complex aspect of the project. What it's going to look like is, again, this is still being designed and moulded, but it's going to look like this. So we can click on this and play the film, similar to last time, and we can see the film metadata. We're going to redesign that just so it's not so long, and we can edit, we can add to collections, and we can have stills, etc. So you can kind of get a bit of a sense of how that's to create the new work for the students to sorry, I don't actually know how to get out. For the students to add the metadata, and then, you know, users can engage with it. So what people can do then is stream films, read associated metadata, view marketing production stills, create playlists based on themes, choose, and the other thing as well is that they're going to be able to choose edit points in the video related to certain things that might be relevant to them. So, for example, we could set an exercise where we say, we want you to find the best stunt scene, or all the scenes where somebody's burnt down a house. It happens. Then they can take that segment of the film and put it over in a little collection, and then we can have, you know, burning houses. And students can look, or car crashes, or period films, or you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so students can start to see, how are other people making their films? What was their budget, et cetera. That's a really exciting part of the project. So the site's going to be optimised for mobile and tablet use. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So what I'm discovering is that we are now in this great position, as I kind of said, about thank you. Okay, to be used as this test case for the university. And this is as the university starts to implement a bigger digital preservation strategy that's far beyond and bigger than us. The hard work has been basically getting these materials digitised, and that, by the way, was a grant through Film Victoria, and we went into a cultural partnership with ACME, who digitised the celluloid film of the collection. And the other hard part, of course, has been getting the metadata done, and you know, we're so close to getting it completed and getting these assets into the actual system. So once we scoped what objects we had, defined audiences, that in turn established the guidelines, principles, processes and procedures so that the objects could be standardised and transformed. Part of my action research project has been exactly that, taking action and then reflecting and discovering better ways to do things. It's very much an iterative approach, and I think it's ultimately defined by digital. And that for me is not a finite process. It's ongoing, it demands action. It's going to be every few years as institutions will be expected to migrate their assets to fit in with technological changes and demands, and that could be through new platforms or codecs. So we're really in this phase now of access, and that's I think the most exciting phase. And we can do our best to preempt audience engagement. The real test is actually going to be in the analytics to support this and audience feedback. So when everything's up and running, other than students inputting their own metadata, will they actually engage and search for other people's work? Will they like, comment, reflect, engage the way what we desire and anticipate? Do we need to make this a pedagogical requirement or an assessment hurdle? Are we just more noise in the digital space? Will researchers engage with our archive and mine data in new and interesting ways? What value can we subtract once the archive's up and running, and is it really a sustainable endeavour? Can we get students to meaningfully reflect on their work in the here and now, or do they themselves need time and distance to be able to do this? Will they come back years later to the archive and contribute to it? And will it still be around? So as you can see, there's much more work to be done, and testing and measuring. The project so far has been going for 5 years, and no doubt it's going to continue for some time yet. So in summary, there is a strong cultural awareness of the social and cultural capital of audiovisual cultural collections. Yet the familiar narrative of inadequate funding, and resourcing as impediments to addressing mixed media holdings is cited by many institutions, not just the University of Melbourne. So our project is a terrific case study and hopefully will inspire other film schools to capitalise on their own collections. We want to become leaders in digital pioneering and engagement. So what seems to be the most important thing, however, is the institutional backing and support. So projects like this can get off the ground through an initial DIY approach. Ultimately, within the context of a large institution, in order for it to be sustainable, they must come under a larger digital preservation vision and system. And that should be framed by strong governance, resource, platform integration, investment in data storage, people and planning. Digital disruption has happened. So digital thinking must become a core part of an organisational structure to ensure that the university is at the cutting edge of the digital frontier. Simply put, digital experiences and solutions only serve to improve audience engagement and satisfy expectations and relevancy in an increasingly competitive online environment. My presentation goes a little bit awry here, but because I kind of just had that all out of order. But these, you can see here, these are the many collaborators, contributors, partners, individuals, developers and supporters who have worked on this project. Thank you very much. There's so much more I could tell you, but any questions, we'll open it up. Yeah.